Our next guest has been a frequent contributor to Townsquare Sunday. Reverend David Lima is the executive minister of the Interchurch Council of Greater New Bedford. But Reverend Lima doesn't spend much time behind a desk.
No.
I think that's fair to say. He's involved in a number of projects and programs with a mission to help others. Now, September is National Suicide Prevention Month. One of the programs Reverend Lima has been very involved in is the Greater New Bedford Suicide Prevention Coalition. He is a co-chair of that organization. Reverend Lima, good to see you again.
Good to see you, Jim. And again, thank you, as always, for having us on.
Despite all the talk about awareness and prevention, suicide is still taking far too many lives, certainly on the national scale. And I'm going to ask you about locally, but let's talk about the problem first off. The numbers are still quite frightening.
The numbers are extremely frightening. Especially when you compare it to other numbers that people are really getting upset about. Opioids is one of the major things that everyone talks about now. The overdoses are just incredible. And the last year that the CDC put out numbers, which was only about a month and a half ago, they certified numbers from 2016. In 2016, we lost 42,000 people in this country to opioid overdoses. 42,000 people died by some kind of opiate drug. That same year, 45,000 people died by suicide in this country. That's 3,000 more, and yet where's the outrage? Where's the legislation? Where's all the different things that are being brought to bear? And we still don't believe there's enough, but it's being talked about all the time with opioids, but not suicide. Here at our state level, one of the things that we have seen is that homicides are trending a little bit on the downside, and it's a little over 100. Motor vehicle deaths is also been trending down over the last 10 years with all the different safety features. There's a lot of things applied to all this stuff, and but that's a little over 300. The same year, again going back to 2016, where they're certified numbers, the same year we lost in this state 631 people to suicide. So you add homicides and motor vehicle deaths. When somebody dies by either one, it's all over the paper, it's all over the radio, it's all over the TV. For days, trials come up, you continue to hear about it. But with suicides, that's not. Now, part of that is because you don't want to suicide ideation. You don't want people hearing about what somebody else did and thinking that might be how I resolve my problems. But what it also does is it hinders us from talking about possible solutions. And there's so many different things that we really should be talking about.
And you have attempted over the past few years here in New Bedford to raise the level of awareness about suicide and to get a community discussion going. Part of the reason you're on this program today. The Suicide Prevention Coalition and others are stepping up to give hope and help others. Tell us about some of the things that's happened in New Bedford in order to get that community discussion going.
Well, over the last few years, when we got started, which was back in 2013, we did a city-long walk. We started from Child and Family Services in the far north end, right where Cushing Avenue and 140 meet. And we walked all the way down to Fort Tabor, and we did that a couple of years. And walks are good. It helped us to get on the map and everything else, but they can be a lot of work and everything else. So we started working on just getting trainings done and doing what we could to support other groups that are doing stuff, especially around mental health. For me, I see, because of the different works that I do through the Interchurch Council, I see that there's correlation a lot of times with the homelessness. Because most of the folks that are homeless, you do have your families that, are one paycheck away and, they're living out of their car. But a lot of the folks that are on our streets, between mental health and substance abuse, so I see a lot of that being intertwined. So we try to really raise the awareness and see how we can get somebody help. The whole part about mental health and the stigma and the shame, somebody doesn't just wake up one morning and decide, well, I think today's a good day to die. There's something that's been going on, a type of history or whatever. Now, again, the three biggest groups of reasons is usually around mental health or substance abuse when somebody dies by suicide. There's a history of it, a treatment of it. And yet, it's one of the more difficult things to get treated for. The list of therapists, psychiatrists, psychologists, people that can work with folks is short. There's not a whole lot of facilities. Insurances, it's one of the toughest things. Most of us have X amount of visits. Most of us have 10 visits. After that, you got to fight in order to get the insurance to cover payments. Well, nobody's getting cured, quote unquote, in 10 visits. Even someone who's going through a depression or anxiety, which may or may not be a precursor, it takes time. It takes months. It takes an ability to just continue to be worked with. And if somebody has a high level of suicide ideation, then you need to continue to work with them, And again, the shame and the stigma, a lot of folks don't want to even acknowledge they have a problem. And so, again, it becomes difficult.
Look, I don't know if there's any way to measure this. What role does opioid drugs play in suicides in New Bedford? As you said, we've had a whole lot of publicity about opioid crisis and people taking opioids and overdosing. Are there people who take opioids to die?
There has been, in fact, this past year at both the national conference in Washington, D.C., and the state conference here in Massachusetts that I go to every year. They have started discussing that the belief could be as high as 30 to 40% of opiate deaths may be suicides. Personally, I think that may be high, but that's just personal. We work highly with those with opiates and with overdoses and obviously with suicide prevention. Here in our county, we're operating with the Office of Attorney Quinn. He's one of only 2 district attorneys that shares information with the local coalition that's doing work. And so we get told within a couple of days of a suicide. We don't get names, that's protected, but we get age, race, manner of death, and any kind of where it occurred, and any kind of information that may have contributed to it. And we are high right now. We're running at a much higher pace than last year. Last year we had 60 suicide deaths in Bristol County. We're in the 50s right now, and we still got a few months to go. Mm-hmm. Out of those, probably at least 8 of them were by opiate deaths, were by an overdose.
You're listening to Townsquare Sunday. I'm Jim Phillips. My guest is Reverend David Lima. We're talking about suicide. September is National Suicide Prevention Month. Several years ago, there seemed to be almost an epidemic of young people taking their own lives. At least seemed that way in New Bedford. Has that lessened at all? It
has, and we thank God and the stars for that. But that's one of the reasons why we got started. Back in 2013, we had June of 2013, which is how our group came to start. We had our 5th suicide of children under the age of 15. In a 22-month period, we had lost 5 children. The youngest was 11. One was 12. It can boggle the mind. How can somebody that young think that this is their only solution? Since that time, we have had a couple of teenagers in Bristol County, and of course, you had the one that is been well known, the Conrad Roy situation, and all that entails. But that's not the common case, and the fact is, that's not the highest rate of suicides. The highest rate of suicides is actually middle-aged white men. And that's come over the last 8 or 10 years, the trend, because of the recession and the difficulty. Corporations have cut back on jobs and whatnot, full-time positions. So when a lot of people lost their jobs in the recession, trying to get back into a full-time position is difficult. And for a lot of us, we are what we do. That's our identity. And so if you lost your job, sometimes you lose your home, you lose your relationship, divorce and other things, and lose identity. And sometimes people are at a hopeless place. And hopelessness is one of the most difficult things to try to overcome.
After the epidemic, what seemed like an epidemic of young people taking their own lives, as you said, it got your group off the ground, and after some formative months, you decided, hey, we got to do more to train people,
right,
to see things in schools. We got to work in the schools. We got to work in corporations, large employers, so that people get it. They understand when someone is on the edge. Frankly, they can reach out.
They could. But I won't tell you that sometimes our concerns is we don't. And one of the biggest reasons, we don't ever think it's going to happen to us or somebody we know. We've all dealt with somebody that's had depression. We've all had depression. How do we deal with it sometimes? We tell people to snap out of it. Come on, you're getting on my nerves already. We don't always know what that fine edge is that takes somebody to a place where they just don't think they can move on. And there is a lot of difficulty because people sometimes think, well, somebody's making a selfish decision. They're just worried about themselves and they don't worry about the aftermath. Well, studies have shown, and the things that we've learned is that when somebody is in so much pain that they overcome their fight or flight, the human being does not want to die. If they're in danger, there's what's referred to as our fight or flight. We're either going to stand and fight against the danger or we're going to run from the danger. Somebody taking their own life, that's a major overcoming of fight or flight. And it takes time to get there. And we may or may not see the signs. There are some signs to see. But we're not always cognizant that somebody that we know, that we care about, could actually be at that place.
You went in schools, you trained teachers, trained staff. Is that continuing?
As much as they'll allow us, we continue to go in, and there's a few different things that are happening. There'll be an announcement. We're actually through our organization and a grant that came through Department of Mental Health, we're going to be funding some trauma training from Leslie College at a pilot program with Roosevelt Middle School in New Bedford. We have gone and trained, probably in the last few years, we've trained on average anywhere from 1,000 to 1,500 people all across the South Coast. And it's not just our group. There are other coalitions in different areas around here, Taunton, Fall River, Plymouth. And so whenever we're allowed, and I don't charge to do what I do, our group is determined not to do that. We will train anybody. And so even now, anybody listening to the sound of my voice, if you have 10 people that you can put in a room that's wanting to learn, we can, within an hour and a half, give you some training to be able to recognize the signs, understand what you can say, how you can refer them to some assistance. Because, again, that's the thing that we have to do.
What can we do as a community to do better with this? I think that all of us could probably think of a few things to say. Love your fellow man, reach out to help somebody, all those things. But everyone's busy. Everyone's got an excuse. We got to get going. We can't, as you said, snap out of it. We can't spend all day talking about this. So, what can we do better?
Well, you put the preacher on his soapbox. So, I'll put the preacher in his pulpit. But what you just said is what we have to do better. Yeah. We have to care a little bit more. We have to take the time. And yes, life has gotten very busy. Everything is very fast. But my biggest thing, it'd be great if we could all be kinder and gentler. I think the atmosphere in this country, from politics to other places, is divisive. And so we have become extremely judgmental and extremely separated. But there are still people that you're close to. And what I suggest to folks is when a difference starts to take place, when somebody has changed their pattern and their character and what they're going through, if they seem to be going through a prolonged difficulty, depression, anxiety, they're going through some difficulty, take the time and make the time to care, to offer some assistance. What are you going through? Sometimes it's an imposition and we do react poorly. But if we take the time, we might be able to hear somebody who's crying out for help but doesn't know how. And so they're doing it in what they're doing. All of a sudden they're withdrawing. The person that's always been outgoing, that's now withdrawn. Somebody who's gone through something very difficult and doesn't seem to be able to move past it. We've got to be able to care enough. And don't think you have to do it yourself. Get other people that know the person that cares to help join in. Offer to just have conversations, take them out, just get a little bit closer. It seems like it might be overwhelming, and it is after the fact. But ahead of the fact, the one thing that we have definitely confirmed with studies and everything else, and I hate data, don't get me wrong, but caring more helps more. And if we just took the time to just offer a little bit of assistance, we could get there.
It's a message we can't share enough, really. Thank you, Reverend Lima, for coming in and all the work that you and others do in New Bedford on this very serious problem.
Thank you very much, always, for having us.
Tomorrow is Frederick Douglass Day in New Bedford. We'll have more when Townsquare Sunday returns.